Alright, so today we're talking about Manor Lords. The only way to kick this off is actually with a quote, and here it is. Not every game should be aimed at becoming some live service boom or bust, and a release should not begin an ever-accelerating treadmill on which devs are forced to run until their mental or physical health breaks down. Yeah, quite a statement. We're talking about Manor Lords and how the hell we should make games, and as audiences, what we should even be asking for. Asks such as, can we have some money to pay our bills from today's sponsor? Us, specifically at Bellular.games, where we publish Loading Screen daily for our members. Now, Loading Screen is on our site. It also is in your inbox as a newsletter. And on Loading Screen, we cover games as they're coming out and loads of breaking stories, as well as things that we're not able to cover here on the main channel with videos. It's only been getting better and better as time goes on. I think it's a fantastic daily read to throw into your rotation, perhaps if you're taking the bus, reading over breakfast, that kind of thing. So if you want to give us a shot, you can consider a free trial over at Bellular.games and get Loading Screen. It's the single best way that you can actually support what we do. So a big thank you to everyone who is chipping in over there right now. With that said, let's get into the news. I do have some bad news to start us off, and it is that we've got to go to LinkedIn to start today's story. I know, I'm sorry, I try not to bring you to the dark places, but we're going to LinkedIn to take a look at what Raphael von Lierop has said. Okay, now that's actually kind of relevant because he is the Chief Creative Officer and founder of Hinterland Studio, and they made a game called The Long Dark. The Long Dark has been very successful. It had an early access launch in 2014, full release 2017, it's been popular, and it's sold real well. And by well, I mean, in 2021, they passed 5 million units sold, and they were able to calculate that once you add in the likes of, Game Pass or whatever services, it's actually 8.5 million players in total. That's a pretty big win. Now, he's been blogging over there, and he's been blogging about his experience of playing Manor Lords. Basically, how he loved Manor Lords and how he thinks it's a very, very high-quality game. But he did say that as an early access product, he thinks it has got some flaws, and he thinks that the concurrent user drops that you can see in Steam are essentially evidence that, those flaws are actually a bit of a problem. So let's read. But given the huge number of wish lists and hype around it leading up to launch, this is something the developer and publisher should have been better prepared for, IMO. Now, I should be clear in saying that from his perspective, he's not particularly worried about Manor Lords as a game, but what he is trying to do is to use his position as an industry leader who has got a lot of skin in the game and has got experience actually shipping products, basically using that to give some advice to other indies, right? So it's that. It's not really some sort of big call-out post. He basically feels that Manor Lords has not really got enough content or systems in the base game, and essentially that the team isn't really designed to put out lots of content quickly, and that is a specific problem for early access games. As one of those things, look, we could all just sit and have a chat about how we want devs to take their time, all right? We want all the things to be good. We would rather that more Valheim content, say, because I know this discussion has happened there, that we get Valheim content that is good rather than Valheim content that is just rushed out to juice up some numbers and make some money. But even though that's the sort of thing that we may all say, that we might actually believe, for a lot of people, they buy a product in early access and they don't see it getting loads of updates and they're pissed. They maybe won't know about the development scenario behind the game. And you know what? They probably won't even care, because what they care about is they bought a product, and that means there are certain expectations. He goes on to say this: early access is a marathon, and when you launch, you need to have your next major content expansion pretty much in the queue. The game has been out for 2.5 months, and there have been 3 fairly small patches with no new content or features. And that essentially means that the game has kind of lost some attention, right? So when you lost the attention, getting players back in is real hard, because then you've got to cut through all of the new games that have came out when you're also doing your update. Now, what he's saying, right, in this post is very logical. It makes sense, and it is pragmatic given how the current industry works. An industry where we are continually seeing devs close or commit to layoffs even when a game appears to have been somewhat successful, because it turns out it may have launched pretty good, but it's not been successful in the long term. Or even situations where a game could be successful, but, well, maybe it just was really expensive to make, and it will take time for that money to reach the developer to the point where they actually do have to do a reduction in headcount in order to keep the lights on. That's the sort of thing that absolutely sucks, but it does happen. And that's where it turns to us. So, a quick question, right? Are you still playing Lethal Company? Are you still playing Helldivers? Are you still playing Manor Lords? If you were there in the initial intake for those games, are you still playing it? That's kind of question number one. And then number two to that is, well, did you feel frustrated because you felt the game wasn't updating fast enough for you? That is basically the reaction that Van Lierop is worrying about, right? And that is where the CEO of publisher Hooded Horse, Tim Bender, came in and basically shared perspective, because this is literally talking about a game that he published. So he responded to the whole post saying this: "This is exactly the kind of distorted, endless growth, burden of expectations, line must go up perspective that causes so much trouble in the games industry." He then clarified, right, that even with no major updates, Manor Lords has sold 250,000 copies in the last month. It still has positive user reviews, and it's got a median playtime of 8 hours and 48 minutes per player. That is actually an impressive playtime because, I mean, look, Steam libraries, how many games are on Steam that you basically try out for a bit, but you never really get back to it? Like, to have your median like that is, like, actually pretty damn good. So from Tim Bender's perspective, the players are happy because you can look at the Steam reviews, the devs are happy, and obviously the publisher is happy. So from his position, right, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Manor Lords other than Van Lierop's sort of perspective on things, right? I mean, personally, I can see all of the business sense, but I do just then think, yeah, but is the whole industry is in this like weird infinite war to infinitely grab all of the players, time for all of time. Because we just have so many live service games and, massive, big update games just all fighting with each other at the same time. I look at that and I think, man, okay, how am I going to compete with Riot? How am I going to compete with, any of these games? Look at, say, World of Warcraft. They've got, like, what? It's a content update, like, every 8 weeks, right? And you're just like, oh my God, this is impossible for a regular studio to keep up with. So, to go to what Tim keeps on saying, quote, "The apparently dark reality that some people, after enjoying their purchase of a premium single-player title, might decide to go on and play another game. The horror. Yeah, I mean, look, if you bought our game, The Pale Beyond, and you haven't got over somehow 2,000 hours, then obviously that's terrible. Terrible. We should have been shipping new lines of dialogue and cosmetics and a battle pass. Oh, yeah, it's kind of tiresome. Again, that's not really stuff the Long Dark people have done. His perspective was just, well, here's how we did the Long Dark. Here's how we actually made early access work for us. Thing is, though, what Tim Bender said, the idea of, like, yeah, people will play a game and then they'll go and play another game afterwards. Well, that's what Tim said, but that's actually where we go back to some of the wisdom from the initial post that was on LinkedIn, and that is basically that if your game loses attention, then that's a player who will not necessarily come back, right? And that could actually scupper your game's growth. So I think we can all agree what Van Lierop's saying, like, does have something to it, right? Like, yes, people will wander off, play another game, they will stop thinking about your game, and that might mean that when your game has got a big update, guess what? The player won't know because they're not even thinking about it. And even if they do get a little toast from Steam telling them that there's a discount or a new DLC, well, we all see dozens of those a day, so it's just going to be, completely drowned out, forgotten about. Thing is, though, there's a difference in these two people. Tim Bender is running a publisher. Van Lierop, he was a founder for a studio. And that does mean that he's more naturally going to be thinking about, okay, well, how do we get some recurring revenue? How do we get things so that we can plan our finances well? How do we turn this into a long-term success that sustains our goals for the studio? Whereas Tim Bender is running a publisher, and that is fundamentally a bit different. And he's really asking the core question, why does a game have to grow past the initial success? Manor Lords was a success, people bought the game, why does it now need to be more successful? And he relayed that whenever he talked to the prime developer behind it before launch, he wanted to reinforce that ultimately the only metric that mattered was, is your core vision for this game actually being met? Like, not player numbers, not growth based on some, expectations from an industry analyst. And basically, he feels that a game should not need to adopt the corporate live service model. When a game is successful, that's like the goal. That's not the starting point. And there absolutely is a wisdom in that. I mean, you look at the amount of, like, weird, seemingly VC-backed games that are making a play for an absolutely humongous audience, and you look at them and you think, that's not going to work. You have so much risk. Like, you not only need to be successful and cut through, you also then need to grow afterwards. That is extremely, vanishingly unlikely. And thinking from that, like, yeah, what Tim's saying makes sense. To continue, success should not create an ever-raising bar of new growth expectations. Not every game should be aimed at becoming some live service boom or bust, and a release should not begin an ever-accelerating treadmill in which devs are forced to run until their mental or physical health breaks down. And that sort of thing is actually a problem. Developing these big games sustainably, It's hard, it burns people out, and at least for a very long time, they would just go into other industries afterwards where they would usually earn way more money and have better working conditions. That said, a lot of big tech companies have also absolutely annihilated parts of their headcount, which could maybe suggest that they viewed that they had grown too fast, that they basically had lots of inefficiencies, and they had decided to do a whole bunch of cuts. Because, right, here's the thing. When you see the headline of job cuts, but record revenues, yeah, those are obviously not job cuts they need to do. What it could be is they think that their organization is inefficient, and therefore they want to remove some of that inefficiency. They may think that they've overhired, and basically, you can have a CEO in a case like that thinking, oh, okay, a bunch of these people must be getting a free lunch. How did it take 10,000 people to run Twitter? I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm saying that that is the sort of decision-making and thinking that goes on at those, sort of big C-suite levels. Of course, today's story is far more on the indie side, and Van Lierop did come back to his post to clarify that he was never asking for anybody to crunch in a game, basically critiquing the publishing plan in a profitability sense, not the developer's work itself. And I do think if you look at Manor Lords, it's an interesting thing. Is it a big success? Yes, absolutely. Could you have done more with it? Yeah, absolutely. Both of these things are true. It's just a case of, well, what do these people want to do? Looking at the stuff with Manor Lords, the amount of money that they would have been able to raise based on those wish lists and community sentiment, seriously, they would have been able to raise crazy, crazy money. Evidently, they were swimming in success and thought, you know what? Maybe this success is enough, and we'll just keep on trucking and we'll make this game. And even putting all the money aside, I think a lot of this is the perceived need to adopt the live service model in order to run your early access game. Because often early access, what's that about? Well, it's about getting some money in and then getting real users who have got skin in the game and then responding to their feedback. That's obviously got to be done right. The fact that your users have got skin in the game, that they put some money down, that can make things a bit more spiky, but it sure will refine the feedback that you get from those people because now they've actually paid for the damn thing. Now, for games like, say, The Long Dark or Manor Lords, there is an expectation, I think, with most players that there will be updates. You know, because it's an early access game. That's actually the goddamn point. Thing is, though, people are getting used to update cadences from absolutely ginormous teams. And that's something that sets expectations within audiences. Again, look at the whole situation with Valheim, where they didn't do a massive wave of hiring so that they could put out way more content for the game and turn Valheim into a big proper live service. They probably could have done that, and there's a decent chance it would have actually succeeded, but it's not what they wanted to do. Thing is, though, players have got that expectation. That's not really me blaming players, it's just that's what the expectation seems to be based on update cadences that people are used to. And of course, the Long Dark people, they would feel that quite keenly actually, because they have consistently been met with customer complaints about their update cadence. So they chose to focus on different areas at different times of development. Things like the survival mode, paid expansion, the full narrative story chapters, and basically at each stage, somebody in the Steam reviews would be saying, oh, you've done this, but why are you not updating the other things? And of course, from their perspective, it's because, well, this is how we're developing the game, in different pieces, and we want to do it in the order we want to do it in for our own reasons, which are probably development related. And so striking this balance is at least partially why the core single player game is actually not done. I mean, the other side of that, obviously, there will be maybe some perfectionism from devs, but basically it is that they had to shift their focus multiple times to actually get user sentiment right. So in games like this, it's less that your update is some sort of amazing new marketing beat that will get people back into the game. It's far more that you've captured an audience and they then expect those updates, even if it is single player. As an example, take for a very different thing, Elden Ring. It was constantly just beset by, demands for what's next, for more content, more details on the expansion. And if you're an exec of a AAA company, you'd probably look at that and think, guys, why are you stopping after one DLC? Can we please have more infinite money? Anyway, for Bender, this is all stuff that has got to change from his perspective, both for audiences and the industry. He essentially said the industry needs to get better at setting expectations, that a game can release, target a sustainable level of success, and be happy with that. And he basically thinks that for players, they need to be comfortable with developers working on games at their own pace. And it's not like at their own pace means, oh, they're lazy and they're not going to work hard to earn their keep. No, I don't really think it's like that. The thing is, right, if you want to do that hyper-aggressive model, well, you're going to need to bulk up your team, all right? Now, this, right, with Manor Lords, is partially a single dev. That would be a single developer who's like, you know, the employee of the company, right? There's like loads of contractors working in this game. So to say solo dev is not really fair because there are many other contributors. Thing is though, if you wanted to have a really brisk update cadence, that would need to change. And that changing could actually change how the game itself feels. It could change the development. I mean, unless you hire right and hire amazingly, the default is that as your team gets bigger and bigger, talent kind of dilutes. Talent gets less concentrated. That's one of the reasons why when a company goes from 400 people to 4,000, it's probably not getting as much bang for its buck out of every person they have. I think a lot of the point is basically that if we take expectations from live service games with, you know, stupid amounts of money behind them and we just start applying that to other things, that it's probably not going to be good for publishers, for developers, or for consumers, for customers, right? Ultimately, we do want a sustainable industry. I would say, though, that like, if you're doing an early access game like this, you need to expectations set very clearly, very robustly, so whenever people do go to make a purchase, they know basically what they're signing up for. So really, it is just a mindset thing. I can totally see anybody looking at Manor Lords and thinking, oh wow, you've really fumbled the bag in that one. If you had DLC or a bunch of updates with new features, oh, maybe your player numbers would have just been, higher and higher and higher. Maybe your sales would have been so much bigger. Oh, the bag is so fumbled. The thing is, though, the people who have actually got, the bag in this case, are looking at their, month where they got 250,000 sales and had no updates. So yeah, some people might think, oh, you could have squeezed more out of that one. But they're probably sitting in, I imagine, like millions of sales very happily. It's a fun situation and one that I think is perfectly paired with this video diving into stuff. This video that touches on Helldivers 2 and the entire story about it losing 90% of its players. But, I try to actually dive into the nuts and the bolts. It's fun. Go check it out. That's it for me. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you over there.